Did you know that becoming Chinese is the latest trend that's going viral on social media?
The becoming Chinese trend is going viral. It all began with a Chinese-American TikToker named Sherry.
I'm gonna let you in on a little secret, okay? Tomorrow you are turning Chinese. And I know that sounds intimidating, but there is no point in fighting it now.
My friend asked me what are my thoughts on the whole becoming Chinese trend, and all I have to say is what took y'all this long to catch on?
Everywhere you look, people are saying things like, "You met me at a very Chinese time in my life," and talking about entering their Chinese era. So as someone with a deep love and respect for Chinese culture who also knows that Chinese New Year is just around the corner, I figured right now is the perfect time to share 12 Chinese habits that have changed my life and can help you transform your life in the year ahead as well. 大家好，欢迎来到我的 YouTube 频道 A to Zen Life. 我叫 Marissa, and in China, I'm what's known as a 洋媳妇 or Western daughter-in-law. 15年多前，我嫁给了我的中国丈夫，我们一起有2个孩子。我的大儿子还是宝宝的时候，我们也在上海住了2年。And I have to say, as someone who knew almost nothing about the Chinese language or culture when I met my husband over 15 years ago, a lot of things I thought were just normal or took for granted growing up as an average white gal from the Midwest ended up in some pretty funny culture shock moments between my husband and I. But I can wholeheartedly say that learning Mandarin and being welcomed into a Chinese family has transformed my life from the inside out. And a lot of the habits I'm sharing with you today have over 5,000 years of ancient Chinese wisdom behind them to help you become the happiest, healthiest, and wealthiest version of yourself possible. Starting with number 1 on this list, which is cleaning as a reset and purification ritual. I wanted to start with this habit because Chinese New Year is still a little bit over a week away as I'm making this video, so that still gives you time to implement this habit before Chinese New Year. So a little bit of background and history here is Chinese New Year is also known as Lunar New Year because there are other Asian cultures that celebrate it, and so it's not exclusive to Chinese culture. However, when you hear Chinese people talking about it, they'll typically call it Chinese New Year, and since this is a video about Chinese habits, that's what I'm going to focus on today. In Western cultures, Christmas is widely considered the biggest and most popular holiday, but in China, Chinese New Year is by far the most important holiday. As I'm sure you might have guessed, Chinese New Year starts on a different day than the typical New Year that we celebrate in the Western world because Chinese New Year is calculated based on the moon calendar or the lunar calendar compared to the regular New Year that we typically think of because we're going by the sun calendar or the Gregorian calendar. So in China, Chinese New Year has deep roots and history and symbolism, and it signifies the start of spring, and it's a time for family reunions, honoring your ancestors, and ushering in good fortune, success, and prosperity. I think it's also worth mentioning here that the Chinese use a 12-animal zodiac system to mark the passing of each year. And this is based on ancient astronomy and folk legends in Chinese culture. So in order, the 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac are Shu, Niu, Hu, Tu, Long, She, Ma, Yang, Hou, Ji, Gou, Zhu. And then apart from the 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac, there are also 5 elements that the Chinese zodiac will rotate through according to the year. So last year was the year of the wood snake, and the year that we're transitioning into is the year of the fire horse. And actually, just as a funny side note here really quick, I thought that I'd mention that because we're going into the year of the horse and the word for horse is ma, there's actually another trend that's going viral in China right now that's taking Draco Malfoy and putting him on banners for the year of the horse for Chinese New Year, because apparently Draco Malfoy in Chinese's last name is Ma Fu. Ma means horse and Fu means good fortune. So this kind of is a wordplay that associates the name Malfoy, to good fortune in Chinese. So that's just kind of an interesting little tidbit for you right there. And as a Harry Potter fan, I think it's absolutely hilarious and I love it. Okay, now that we've gotten that culture and history lesson out of the way, all of that to say that Chinese New Year is a big deal. And one important tradition for welcoming the new year is a ritual called 扫尘, which literally translates to sweeping away dust. But the interesting thing about this is that the word chen for dust is also a homonym for the Chinese word that means old, also chen. And just like we saw in the Malfoy example, there's a lot of these examples of words that sound like each other that are thought to bring good fortune and luck and prosperity into your life. So 扫尘 doesn't just mean sweeping away dust. Literally, it also means out with the old and in with the new, sweeping the old out so that you can welcome all of the new and good and positive and revitalizing energy into your life. So Chinese people clean before Chinese New Year to symbolically sweep away bad luck, misfortunes, and all the negative energy from the previous year, which helps them reset both their home and their life and creates a clean, tidy space to welcome good fortune, prosperity, and joy into their home in the new year. And this sweeping tradition was recorded in ancient Chinese texts as far back as 241 BC, by the way. So in my family, around 1 to 2 weeks before Chinese New Year, we start decluttering and deep cleaning our house. By getting rid of worn out and broken items, cleaning and airing out all of our bedding, vacuuming and dusting all of the rooms, and making sure that the kitchen and the entryway in particular are clean and free of clutter and mess. If you want more tips and ideas on how to clean and declutter your home, I will be sure to link a few videos down below for you. But if you want to do this, just be sure that all of your cleaning and decluttering is done before the new year actually hits, because otherwise you risk sweeping away all of your luck and good fortune. Chinese habit number 2 is to always wear slippers in the house. I've actually got my slippers right next to me, in fact. As you can see, they're nice and warm and cozy for the winter. This habit was on my mind recently because when we were flying on the airplane to go visit my in-laws for the holidays, I was watching Home Alone on that flight. And you know that scene in Home Alone where Kevin jumps on the bed with his shoes on? Yeah, that's basically a horror movie moment in a Chinese household. But I had to laugh at myself when I was watching Home Alone because now I feel absolutely horrified when I watch that. But I used to do that all the time when I was a kid growing up in Indiana. And there are 2 main reasons why Chinese people remove their shoes when they're entering the house. The first reason is to show respect for the host and the household, and that applies to both when they go to other people's houses and in their own house as well. And then the second reason is that it's just so much easier to keep things clean if you take your shoes off when you come in from the outside, because everything from the outside world like dirt, bacteria, stress, and bad energy is believed to be carried into the house on the shoes on your feet. And what's interesting is that nowadays modern science actually backs this belief up. And I found one study that found that a large number of bacteria, up to 421,000 units, can be trapped under the sole of the shoe. And other studies have found that up to 96% of people have bacteria, including E. coli, on the bottoms of their shoes. Not to mention allergens and toxic contaminants that can be carried in, such as pollen, pesticides, etc. So nowadays, when we enter our home, shoes come off immediately and get put away. And then the slippers will go on, at least for the adults. And honestly, my floors stay cleaner, my home feels calmer, and it's just a nice way to relax and reset and get cozy when you enter your home. The third habit is to never drink cold water, and especially never to drink ice water. And one of the things that I've noticed in this becoming Chinese trend is how a lot of people are drinking these Chinese teas that are made with ginger and whatnot. Oh, I forgot to put my goji berries in here. Oh, so sad. Oh well. I actually picked up this habit even before I met my husband because a lot of my friends and roommates back in college were Chinese or Asian, and apparently this is something that's very common in a lot of Asian cultures. But I remember one roommate in particular who would get so mad at me when I would want to drink ice water, especially if 大姨妈来了, which is how the Chinese say that ant flow has come. I think this is one area where Chinese habits and culture diverge from Western culture because when I was growing up, it was thought that ice water is a good way to speed up your metabolism because it cools down your body and your body is forced to heat back up, so that will boost your metabolism basically. But in Chinese culture, ice water isn't refreshing, it's disruptive, especially for digestion, circulation, and your hormones. A lot of Chinese habits are rooted in TCM, or traditional Chinese medicine, and in TCM, cold water is believed to shock the body, slow digestion, and weaken your internal balance over time. So instead, you're supposed to drink warm water and hot tea, even in the dead of summer, which honestly is probably one of the habits that I struggle with the most because your girl loves a glass of ice cold lemonade and ice cold water in the summer. What can I say?
What you must learn is that these rules are no different than the rules of a computer system. Some of them can be bent, others can be broken.
But I will say that particularly when 大姨妈来了, I do switch over to warm and hot beverages, and it does seem to help with my bloating and cramps and just overall coziness and comfort. So give it a try and see what you think. Number 4, food is the best daily medicine. So going back to TCM, one of the core principles of traditional Chinese medicine is this idea of balancing yin and yang. Yin foods are foods that have a cooling effect on your body, such as spinach and watermelon, and yang foods are foods that have a warming effect on your body, like chicken or cinnamon. This was such an interesting concept for me to learn as a Westerner, and it did lead to a lot of surprising aha moments for me. For example, one time when I was learning Mandarin, I was watching this show called Happy Chinese that followed an American named Susan who was living with a family in China. And I remember one episode in particular where the mom sat down in front of the TV and was watching soap operas or something and ended up eating one too many small oranges while she was watching TV and got something called 上火. So 上火, or getting internal heat, is a TCM concept that refers to an imbalance caused by excessive yang energy that often results from eating foods that are too spicy, too many fried foods, or food that is too greasy. But while eating food in excess can certainly cause an imbalance of yin and yang, you can also use food as a way to bring balance and harmony back into the body. So one story that I've never shared on my channel before is back when we were moving to Germany a few years ago to reunite with my husband's family, my oldest son, for some reason, had some kind of problem with his digestion where every morning he would wake up and he would throw up basically this really frothy white bile on an empty stomach. And at that time, we were actually living with my Chinese in-laws. And when my mother-in-law saw that my son was having this issue, she said that he had too much yin in his body. And so she told me that every morning I should make him a nice warm cup of ginger tea. So every morning, the first thing that I would do when I woke up is I would go to the kitchen and I would chop up some ginger and make that into a tea for my son to drink when he woke up. That did fix the problem. So that was definitely a big moment where I witnessed the power of traditional Chinese medicine firsthand. Another food that I see getting mentioned in a lot of these videos is congee, and I would say that congee is basically the equivalent of chicken noodle soup in the Western world in terms of comfort and health benefits. And I have to say, we definitely love a good pot of congee in our home, particularly chicken congee with scallions. And whenever someone isn't feeling well in our family, I will rotate between making chicken congee and making chicken noodle soup, but I'll always put in a nice big chunk of ginger whenever I do that. The fifth Chinese habit is giving consumables as gifts. I have to say, as a former hoarder turned minimalist, this has been probably one of my favorite cultural shifts because I came from a very stuff-focused family. But nowadays, instead of gifting stuff that often turns into clutter, we've adopted the Chinese tradition of giving things like food or tea or fruit or everyday essentials that can get used up instead of a gift that might just get shoved in a drawer or collect dust on a shelf. Giving consumables as gifts quietly communicates care without adding burden. And for example, last time we went to visit my in-laws, what we took as gifts for them was a huge bag of pine nuts that we got from Costco, big jars of Cetaphil moisturizer that we got from Costco. And in the past, we've also given things like deli meat when we went to Spain, or vitamins, or jars of honey. And if all else fails, especially with kids, you can always give the gift of cold hard cash in what's known as a hongbao, which is basically a cute red envelope that you put money inside and give as a gift for holidays and birthdays. And like I said, as a minimalist, I love this habit of giving consumables, and I think that it's gone a long, long way in dramatically reducing the clutter in our home. Number 6, add gentle movements into your daily routine. I think the mindset and traditions around exercise in Chinese culture are a good example of how exercise doesn't need to be extreme to be effective. Of course, there are examples of extreme exercise, like if you think about the Shaolin monks and their exercise routine, obviously the kinds of exercises they do to strengthen their fingers, their leg muscles, and to increase their flexibility seem pretty extreme. But I would say for the average Chinese person, consistency beats intensity, and a lot of them are doing exercises like walking and stretching and Tai Chi or Qigong. And a lot of these traditional Chinese exercises and movements focus on things like keeping energy flowing, maintaining joint mobility, and lowering stress levels. I have to train you a little bit here because my father-in-law is 85 and my mother-in-law is 75, and they are both in fantastic shape. And actually, it kind of became a joke in our family because at one point I realized that my Chinese mother-in-law was in better shape and more flexible than I was, and she could do all of these exercises and she could even bend down and touch her toes, and that was something that I couldn't do. So a few years back, I actually did a 30-day challenge where I tried to add in a daily exercise routine that's not Chinese, but a lot of the movements that are in that exercise routine are very gentle and flowing, and it's not extreme at all. And by the end of that challenge, I was able to touch my toes and I felt a whole lot healthier, a whole lot more energetic, and even lost a little bit of weight. And again, that was my mother-in-law who inspired me to undertake that. So big shout out to her. But I have to say this playful and gentle mindset towards exercise has really encouraged me to stop all or nothing thinking and extreme thinking towards workouts, and helped me get better about finding small ways to add gentle movements into my daily routine. Number 7 is to aim to save 30 to 40% of your income. Did you know that Chinese households have one of the highest annual savings rates in the world, with averages ranging from between 35 and 45% of their disposable income being saved each year? This is especially dramatic when you compare how much the average Chinese household saves to the average American household, with the average American household savings rate hovering between 3 to 5%. Now, to some degree, this high savings rate can be seen as both protective and preventative because compared to other countries, China does have a weaker social safety net and higher costs for healthcare and education. But there's also a degree of cultural emphasis on values such as simplicity and frugality that have been heavily influenced by Confucianism that sees things like simplicity and frugality as being noble and honorable. For those of you who are new around here and who aren't familiar with my husband and his story, he actually grew up in extreme poverty in the mountains of China, and his home didn't have things like electricity. It didn't have things like running water. But even though his family experienced extreme hardship and even food scarcity, for them, frugality was never about deprivation. It was always viewed as a form of wisdom and protection and freedom. And so even as his family situation improved, they always remained extremely frugal. But for them, as well as us now, frugality isn't about being cheap. It's about being extremely mindful and intentional with your money and the resources that you have on hand. And I think a lot of people could boost their savings rate by 5 or 10% or more if they just were able to flip their mindset around towards budgeting and saving money and stop seeing it as restriction and deprivation and start seeing it as something that is fun and helps you build financial freedom and independence. Habit number 8 on this list kind of goes hand in hand with the last point, and that is to avoid debt as much as possible. There's a popular Chinese proverb that goes, 无债一身轻. And this is a phrase that means rich is the man with no debt. And this idiom is used to describe the peace of mind and freedom that comes with being financially unburdened and free from debt. Ever since my husband and I worked and saved our butts off to pay off $250,000 worth of debt over 10 years ago, now it is, I guess. Ever since then, we've made it a priority to avoid debt as much as possible. And so if we can't pay for something in cash, our motto is we can't afford it. The 9th habit is to value knowledge and skills above material possessions. In Chinese culture, education is considered one of the highest forms of wealth, and I would say this is particularly true when Chinese parents think about what they want for their children and the future generations. And there's a quote that's famously attributed to Bruce Lee that goes, "Instead of buying your children all the things you never had, teach them all the things that you were never taught." And like I said, as a minimalist who came from a very stuff-centric family, nowadays I really see the wisdom in this because things like degrees, the knowledge that you acquire from books and skills and mentors, these are all things that can never be taken away from you. Material possessions and stuff can break, and status symbols can fade, but knowledge compounds for life. And adopting this habit helped me shift my mindset away from the pursuit of stuff and material possession towards things that actually matter and make a difference in my life. Number 10, find belonging in third places. So if you're not familiar with the term third places, this is a word that was coined by a sociologist named Ray Oldenburg, and it's used to describe a social environment that's separate from home, which is the first place, and work, which is the second place, where people can gather informally for community, conversation, and to find belonging. And I have to say, at least based on my experience living in Shanghai, I think that China does third places way, way better than we do them here in the US. For example, in Shanghai, where we used to live, there was a park right next to our building, and throughout all times of the day, I could look out the window and see people in the park doing things like Tai Chi and playing Chinese chess and dancing in the plaza. And I found it especially heartwarming and enriching because I noticed that a lot of those people were older people, and I couldn't help but compare them to my grandma back in the US, who, after my grandfather passed away, pretty much went from being completely independent and taking care of the house and cooking all the food to moving in with my aunt and basically becoming completely sedentary, only sitting in her chair, watching TV, playing Sudoku, petting the cats, and never basically went outside ever again unless it was to go to a doctor's appointment. And it really made me wish that my grandma had a third place like that after my grandfather died, that she could go and she could create warm relationships and find support and belonging in a community outside of her family, it seems like it's just so much harder to find that kind of environment here in the USA. Especially if you live in the suburbs or in rural areas, there's just not that many places that you can go. And I do think about how much that isolation and that aloneness might have contributed to her mental decline in her later years. So when we moved to this area, even though it's the suburbs, I made sure to look for third places where we could create a sense of community and find belonging. We purposely bought a house close to a park so that my kids could play with their friends when the weather is good. And we go to the library all the time, and we have a beautiful library in our community. So the older I get, the more I realize isolation is expensive and community is healing. So no matter where you live, I would definitely encourage you to look for a sense of community and belonging in some of these third places. Habit number 11 is to protect your skin from the sun. This is another one of those things that my Chinese friends and roommates used to harp on me about, because where I was growing up, it was really, really common to go to the pool and not only not wear sunscreen, but to slather on oil so that you could get as dark as possible. And a lot of my teens and early 20s were spent working at tanning salons where I got free tanning. And so I did a lot of damage to my skin over the years. But by contrast, a lot of my Chinese friends and family grew up with a cultural tradition of protecting their skin. I will never forget the time back before my husband and I were even married. We went to China with his family to climb the mountain to go visit his ancestors, and it was the middle of summer. It was so hot, and I didn't have any sun protection on. I didn't have any sunscreen. My father-in-law gave me this crazy trucker hat to put on my head, and my sister-in-law, who was obviously smart and thought ahead, brought what's called a yangsan, which is a sun umbrella. So I just remember climbing the mountain and seeing my sister-in-law ahead of me with this sun umbrella, and it was just so funny. Speaking of my jiejie, she actually gave me this dress that you see here, which I absolutely love. It's from a Japanese brand called Muji, actually, and I love it because it's really soft and it's double lined. It's like quilted so that it's extra warm in the winter. So talk about cozy. But this tradition of skin protection isn't just about vanity. It's also very smart, because in my family alone, I know 3 people who have had to get surgery to remove skin cancer because of years of sun damage from not protecting their skin. And not only can this habit potentially protect your health, but it also has the added benefit of helping you age much more gracefully over time. And finally, the 12th habit on this list is to feng shui your environment. In Chinese, the word feng means wind and shui means water. So at its core, feng shui is an ancient Chinese system for environmental design that allows energy, also called qi, to move freely throughout your home, supporting you and a healthier, happier, and more successful life. And the basic idea behind feng shui is that your home isn't neutral. Everything in it has energy, and that energy can either support and uplift you, or it can drag you down. According to feng shui, clutter blocks qi, crowded layouts create stress, and dark, stagnant spaces affect mood, sleep, focus, and even finances. So achieving good feng shui means focusing on things like removing clutter from your home, clearing out the entryway so positive energy can flow into your home and life, creating balance between open spaces and functionality, and arranging furniture so that you feel safe, grounded, and supported. And again, just as it is with a lot of the other habits on this list, modern science actually backs up feng shui, because it's found that clutter can increase cortisol levels, particularly in women, which can contribute to everything from higher levels of stress to insomnia to overeating and just poor health overall. The bottom line is that if your home feels cluttered and messy, it can also drag down and make you feel burdened in other areas of your life as well. So if you're looking for ways to declutter and reset your life for the year ahead, be sure and go check out one of these videos that YouTube thinks that you'll like, or I'll see you next week. Until then, Take care. Bye-bye.